Good morning. Forgot to start the music. Okay. Today is the 28th of July, 2018. It's a Saturday. This is the nybbles.io daily programming stream. My name is Jeff, and I write code every day and stream most of those days here on Twitch. I'm primarily working on Basecode, which is a new programming language that I'm designing. And I'm in the process of building a bootstrap compiler for at least part of that language, enough that I can start rewriting the compiler infrastructure in itself and get to a self-hosting point. So yesterday, towards the end of the day, because I had a bunch of stuff happen, other stuff was happening earlier in the day, which is why I couldn't stream. I kept thinking about how irritating it was. There were several things that were irritating about the way the code was. And this is one of those things I definitely will tell, up and coming and aspiring programmers. Listen to your gag reflex, right? When your code starts giving you gag reflex, you need to pay attention. And for a while, I was kind of suppressing it because I'm like, I can tolerate it. But finally I'm like, fuck this, I hate this. So, where do I start? Okay, first. This goes back, really actually has nothing to do with Basecode per se. This goes back to when I was streaming Ryu more often. And I'm nominally using C++ 17. So what does that mean? What that means is I'm telling the compiler that the C++ standard is 17. I am using I'm using static inlines, in classes I'm using namespace, the enhanced namespace syntax. But really, primarily, that's about it. And C++ 17 is, syntactically, there really wasn't that much added to the language, right? There were a handful of things, pretty small. There were some library things that were added, but, and this seems to be a rather consistent problem with the C and C++ space as compiler vendors go. GCC and Clang and Microsoft, they'll all say, or LLVM, oh, we support 17 and here are all the things we support, but you get down there and you look at the details and, well, they support everything but any and variant and file system. And GCC is really currently, in my opinion, the winner in terms of completeness of their support for 17. They do have file system, they do have any and variant, and it's all standard packaged, sort of. There is again, the file system stuff is not part of the standard library yet, so you have to link that separately. But compared to Clang and to Visual Studio, GCC is well ahead of the others. However, and this is, it's like dependency nightmares, right? GCC works great on Linux, of course, works tolerably on OS 10. However, GDB does not work on OS 10 at all. The old versions work, so up to version 8, I believe. But 8.1, which is what would be advisable to use with GCC A1, does not run on OS 10 at all. Now, this is not per se GCC's fault. This is Apple adding in security bullshit that people don't ask for. And that security bullshit breaks the debugger. And so that's kind of the state of the union. I mean, honest to God, right now, it's my opinion that the three major compiler vendors, so GCC, Clang, and Clang/Apple, and Microsoft, they will fully support 17 on the day that 20 is ratified by the committee. But when 20 is approved, whatever that's going to be, that's the day. So basically, in about 2.5 years, every one of the compiler vendors will finally have gotten all their shit together and actually fully out of the box, no hinky-dinky crap, support 17. With, of course, Microsoft being the last. They will be the last one. Okay, so then I was getting a lot of questions on stream, Well, why are you using Boost? So I was using Boost, right? Why was I using Boost? Well, because I had a lot of experience with dealing with all the bullshit of when people talk about not liking C or C++, this is, to me, it's a tooling and a culture and a ergonomic problem, not necessarily a language problem. I mean, we can argue about parts of the language and the way the compilers work and stuff that are shitty. But fundamentally, what happens, right, is, here's current state in C++, but you can't really code to that. Because if you're going to do any kind of cross-platforming, realistically, you have to go to the lowest common denominator, which is Visual Studio. So then you have to come down here. And they say they support 17, except they don't do, named initializers, and they don't do, file system or variant or any correct. There's all this shit they don't do. So you have to, take all the stuff out. And of course, Clang sits somewhere in between. So anyway, I was kind of when I say nominally doing 17, what I meant was, again, I was using the parts that were mostly available across all the different compilers. But people kept, saying, well, why aren't you using variant with 17? Why aren't you using any with 17? Why aren't you using file system with 17? And I honestly took the question to heart and thought about it and thought, okay, well, why aren't I? Right? And here we are many months later, and I can tell you why I will not be using those features in 17 until 20 comes out, because they aren't fucking supported. There's just too many issues with the compilers themselves at that level right now. None of them are compatible with each other. There's issues if you build libraries with Clang and try to link them with GCC. It's a mess. It's a fucking mess. And then I, took all the years of being a grubby, dirty C programmer and C++ programmer whereby I would do my dependencies. I'm going to show what I did here, and it's going to cause a lot of, youngins listening to me to lose their breakfast or dinner because, why aren't you using a package manager, and why aren't you? Because they do, package managers are actually evil. I'm convinced. They are not, package managers are great for installing the operating system stuff you need. Oh, I need HTOP. I need OpenSSL. I need, they're not perfect, but they're roughly okay in that space. Sorta. But when it comes to building software, if you want to go insane, if you want to drive yourself to the brink, then the very best way to do that is to try to use a package manager. Because A, now you have to fight with the fucking package manager, and especially in the C++ space, where like really early days primordial shit here. VC package barely works, Conan barely works. And fundamentally, after going through this cycle again, I just realized it's wrong. It's just the wrong way to do it, period. Yes, there are some nice attributes about it conceptually. Conceptually, it's nice that you could say, I use this format library. I only have to download that or build that once in one shared location, and everybody can use that. But the devil are always in the details. Then you discover that this other library uses that same library, but it uses a different version. And so then, how do you solve that problem? And none of these platforms really have very good answers there. So long story short, I had tried to use Conan, and Conan is very much designed in the image of like NPM or, gems or, stuff along those lines. Here's a manifest of what my project needs. Composer, for like PHP. Here's a list of the things that my project needs. Here are the versions. Do this for me, right? And yeah, there's just all sorts of first. They have absolutely nothing, like there's very little practical packaging done already with Conan. You have to do it mostly yourself. And at that point, it's like, well, why? If I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do what I have done here, which is the sanest thing that you can do. VC package, as Lord Boren points out, builds everything from source, which is correct. You should do that, but where possible. But VC package suffers from also the fact that, I need 10 dependencies, they have 7. And VC package is completely curated by Microsoft. So you have to sign an agreement with them that you can contribute packages to them, and then you have to contribute it. It goes through a pull request process. It's going to take forever, right? And yeah, it's painful. And I consider that a big experiment that failed, and I won't be going back to that model anytime soon. And but Rust has a nice package manager, but it has the same fucking problem, right? Because I've built some things in Rust where I use a Rust package that uses this version of STL, and then this other one uses that version. And to me, again, fundamentally, the concept behind the package manager, at least the way these work, is somewhat flawed. And again, there's nice conceptual ideas of what these things are giving you, but in practice, they're not doing it right. And they're just, the more dependencies you get, the more things that share dependencies between each other, the more convoluted and fucked up it gets. And, you know, is cargo or NPM or composer or NuGet, is it great if you just have to like create a quick little program and, oh, add this, add this, add this, add this, okay, and it's gonna be 50 lines of code and who gives a shit? Yeah, they're great for that. Is it great when you start getting into, you know, something that's complex, cross-platform, you know, and oh shit, this particular thing doesn't quite work right because, you know, it's written in Rust, but it's a wrapper around this other thing which isn't, and that doesn't cross-compile correctly. You know, you fundamentally, right? Now, as you get higher and higher up, I'm going to explain that in a sec here. Shikata, I'm going to show how I do it. It's old-fashioned, right? I embed them, right? This is how you do it, right? I have an ext folder, and I copied these things in. And when I say copied, I mean I don't have a link to the Git repository for these. I mean, I got these versions and I checked them the fuck in. These are mine now. And is there a downside to that? Sure. It made the Basecode, you know, Git repository have 60,000 files because Boost is, you know, massive. But I control the dependencies now. I build them, they're integrated into my process. I don't have to fucking, you know, deal with any other tools. I don't have to deal with any other crap. I don't have to deal with file system paths. I don't have to deal, you know, this code, I pulled this code down in a Windows virtual machine last night, and it's almost, I mean, it builds. There's some windowy stuff, right, that I don't support correctly. But yes, exactly. I mean, there's no other way to do this, in my opinion. Yes, there are trade-offs. The trade-off is it makes your repository bloat, you know, you got to deal with that. But by golly, this fucking works, you know, and it's simple and you're in control. And, you know, it's like Boost. Boost has, I want to use Boost file system and I want to use Boost system. Those are libraries, they actually compile. And I just added in some targets, you know, to do that. I mean, how all the bullshit you go through trying to do this stuff using these other tools, and in the end, what is Boost System? Boost System is one fucking CPP module. That's it. What's the file system? It's these common files, and if you're on Windows, this extra file. That's it. You know, oh, there is one other thing with Boost that you gotta be careful with. You have to disable their auto-linking. Because on Windows, they have header files that try to do magic, and they try to generate library names and shit for you and auto-link, and yeah, turn all that crap off. Doesn't apply in other platforms, but on Windows, yeah, I scratched my head on that one for about 10 minutes, and then I remembered that you can actually control the linker with pragma statements in Visual C++. And I'm like, oh, fuck. But easy enough to work around. Anyway, and obviously, like, what does it take to add the format library? Well, the format library is cool. It already uses CMake. So, and the, you know, projects that use CMake are on varying levels of being consumable properly. But format does it right. I mean, you just add the subdirectory and it exposes, you know, symbols for you to use for includes and stuff, and you're done. Dyn call, you know, not quite as well structured, but it's also a CMake project. And, you know, pretty straightforward. So what I did was, not only did I suck the dependencies in like this, vendor them in, and they're just a part of the project now, and but I also changed the code, so no more standard file system, no more standard any, no more standard variant. Everything's Boost. If anybody asks me why I'm using Boost, I'm just going to say because. Because there is no other answer. I'm using Boost because it works. Because that's what's consistent and compatible. That's what we'll build on Windows, OS X, and Linux, and not cause a nightmare. And eventually, you know, again, when we have C++ 2023, then C++ 17 will finally be stable, right? It just seems to be the way it works. So, and by doing that, by getting rid of all the C++ 17 standard libraries, relying on Boost again, I was able to drop my dependency on GCC 8.1, which was very bleeding edge, very painful. You know, now on OS X, I've dropped down to Clang again, just the default Clang, right? Whatever Apple ships works, no problems. The debugger works, I can see everything again. It's bliss. On Linux, you know, it'll build with whatever version of GCC you have installed, and works, it's great, no problems. On Windows, surprisingly, and we're going to look at that here in a little bit, it wasn't too bad. You know, I was able to first, you know, I'll give Microsoft some credit. Their CMake support in Visual Studio 2017 has improved since the last time I used it. It's still not perfect, or it has many more little weird oddities than, say, Sea Lion, but it generally works. And now, of course, I have a separate branch now that I'm playing with to see just how impactful changes to the source space are for Windows. And up to this point, it's not horrible, but Visual C++ does not support named assignments and initializers, which I'm using literally everywhere. So I had to clean a bunch of those up. So stuff like this, Visual C++ pukes on it. It just can't do it, which is silly, right? I mean, this wasn't 17. This is like 14, you know? And I think even C11 supports this. But yeah, so Microsoft's compilers don't support C right either. That's a totally different story. No, it's not. I mean, Visual C++ supports pockets of stuff. It doesn't support all of it. Like, they will support static inline, but they won't support named initializers. So the other thing that's different, that's very Windows specific, and this is, you know, I've dealt with this before. You have to export things explicitly on Windows. And you have two options there. You can, so I don't know, let's take a look at, you know, session. So you can either do, you know, decal spec DLL export here, right? Which of course ultimately, what you really do for cross-platforming it is you create some kind of macro, right? So you'd have API export here or whatever. And this would be a macro that on Windows would expand to the decal spec, and on other platforms it's just empty, doesn't do anything. But then you have to put that like everywhere, more or less. Whatever is leaking out publicly has to be exported. You can do the exporting with a def file, and I've thought about maybe going that route with it, because then it has less impact on the code base. But then you have another place, right? You have another file, and so if you add more stuff to your library that you want exported in the DLL, then you have to remember that has to go in the def file. And now you do have more control in the def file as well, so you can move things around in sections a little bit more freely. You have the most control there that link.exe will give you on Windows. So that's another big impact in the code base. There's another really weird, for some reason, Visual Studio, the way it interprets calling like C stir, like so if you have a standard string and you call C understir on it, which is supposed to return a const char star, which it does, but their compiler, like, it gets super confused because of the templating magic that they use. It doesn't, it barfs. So you end up needing a cast on a couple of those. Other than that, everything else pretty much works. So where I had ended up leaving off yesterday on the Windows stuff was going through and trying to export everything, so that the DLL would actually be consumable by the command line program. And I originally didn't have any intention really of supporting Windows, but it kind of, I don't know, it was weird yesterday. Like it had finally pissed me off enough. I'm like, damn it, this should work. It should, it should just be there. So anyway, that's my long story on dependencies. and everything still works. It's good to go. Build times, on OS 10, if I have to rebuild everything, it's not bad at all. Again, like Boost it's 95% header files. So the few things that I have to manually build are not a big deal. The format library is tiny. It's like a couple C++ modules. Dyn-call is tiny. It's C, so it compiles super fast. So again, it hasn't really changed, build times, in my opinion, too significantly. And let's see. So that's dependencies. I'm going to be doing the same thing with Ryu. So because Ryu kind of is using a lot of the same dependencies, and it has more, so it has SDL and a couple other things. So that'll be another side project, get that code base refactored. And I think I had started to use like standard variant in any and file system in Ryu. I'm going to go back through again, re-baseline everything to Boost, and then make sure Ryu builds cleanly from scratch on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And then going forward at least with C++ stuff, and certainly for Basecode, I have some ideas about having a package manager, but doing it in a way where it's vendored and you have control over it, and even going so far, because Basecode with metaprogramming will kind of allow this. You know, like as an example, sometimes you get a package from somebody, a library, and it's right there, it's 99.98%, but there's this one situation where you want to change something, but then if you change the file, you know, ideally I don't want to change their code. I can if I have to, but ideally I wouldn't do that, because if I did want to upgrade, it would make it a little harder. But I'm thinking about ideas for Basecode of how we could do that, how you could customize a vendored library without keeping your changes somewhere else, but having them override whatever the vendor is providing. I think that actually would be kind of a convenient feature, a rarely used feature, hopefully, but I think it might be convenient in some cases. There was a bug that I found also as I was playing around. I just, for the heck of it, put an anonymous block in here, and it wasn't code generating. I fixed that. There is an issue in the parser still. Like, this parses, but for completeness and consistency's sake, I mean, technically this is a statement. It's just a multi-line statement. And the end of that statement should have a semicolon for consistency, but I think I know where the problem's at. I just need to revisit that code. In the parser, yeah, it's not. I think the reason, if we look at parser and we go to parse statement, yeah, this is the issue. I'm not sure why I'm doing that for a block. So if it's an expression or if it's a block, I'm bailing on the rest of the statement. It's not making a statement. And I'm not sure why I had that there. Not even really sure why I'm bailing on lines or line comments and block comments either. I mean, I think I have an idea. I think, yeah, it didn't really change anything. Oh, well, interesting. Maybe it did. Procedures look fine, but yeah, that anonymous block now is being emitted twice. I'm not sure why. Yeah, so I gotta revisit this. The comments I kind of understand. I think syntactically the reason I'm bailing on them is because they're not really statements. But this is where the issue is, right? The node that comes back from parse statement, we're only checking for the semicolon if it is a statement. And for an anonymous block, we would probably want the label logic to be applied. So yeah, I'll have to figure out. Again, I don't think it's just affecting code generation slightly. And I'm sure there it's probably just something silly. Hey, Chris Goku 2. So yeah, I gotta figure that out. It's not right. And it is a statement, right? It just to be consistent in language, it should be treated like that. There are also initializer, finalizer requirements here, because this is a scope, and anything that's auto or stack like here needs to go bye-bye. So yeah, that's not being handled. So this brings me to a couple things. So first, starting on Monday, the 30th? Yes, Monday the 30th. And I'm going to put a new schedule up on the Twitch channel page, and I'll update the Discord, and I'll put something on Twitter. My schedule is going to change a little bit. So I am going to stream starting on Monday, Monday through Friday, every month. Or I'm sorry, let me restate this. Starting on the 30th, I will stream Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. And the main reason for that is I have a bunch of life stuff schedule-wise that is going to essentially prevent me from streaming much beyond, say, 8 a.m. Specifically my daughter, her school schedule. So I'm got to play Mr. Dad a lot here coming up. And at least, starting next week and then through next May, I guess, May or June, May, I think. Yeah, I'll be doing a lot of that in the early morning hours. So, streaming 5 to 7, that gives me her schedule's closer to like 8:30, 9 o'clock local time. Gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So if I get into something or people are asking questions or whatever, I'll have about 30 minutes of, buffer time there. So I could go to 7:30, but not much beyond that. And most days it'll probably just be 5 to 7. So yeah, the stream's going to be shorter, and I'm not going to stream on Saturdays anymore. The reason I'm going to cut out Saturdays is because my medication schedule has changed, and literally on Saturdays I'm kind of brain dead. So yeah, I'm not really at my best. So I'd rather just, focus on days where I'm much more functional. So yeah, Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. And because the stream will be shorter, I do need to, I think, kind of maybe try to structure things a little bit differently than I would normally. When I do my regular 5-hour thing, which I will still work basically the same block, it's just it will have interruptions within it that aren't really conducive to streaming. So, but for the stream itself, because I can easily, like I've already burned an hour, right, just talking. So I could really easily just burn 2 hours and not really get anything done. So I started thinking about, okay, so for Basecode specifically, how could I kind of plow through the rest of the Bootstrap compiler, verify what I have and kind of continuously verify, and then create test cases for what I don't have. And so obviously that sounds like needing to build some kind of tester. I don't want to do unit testing per se, right? Because to write those unit tests in C++, I think is a waste. What I think I would rather do is, so we have the command line compiler, that'll stay. We need that. But we'll have like a tester or something, and we'll have a bunch of Basecode source files. We'll have different test cases, okay? And under each folder, we'll have Basecode source files, and the test runner, right, will always look for a certain file, like test or something, or runner inside of the test folder. So essentially we'll have a C++ program, we'll tell it, here's the folder you're gonna scan. It will scan that folder, and every folder underneath that will be considered a test case. And then inside of that test case, we'll have a Basecode file called run or whatever, test, and the runner will compile that. And for now, we'll force it to run through the compile time pathway. Once we get the native code gen all the way out to the edge, then we'll do both, right? So, and when I say we'll do both, if the runner explicitly tells the compiler to run compile time code, it will. Otherwise, it will compile the code and then run it. And then the validation, that one's gonna be a little tricky in the short term, but my general thought is there would be probably a compile time thing, because that's what we're going to be able to do first, where it's going to run, and then we'll have a function or another module we compile that has a function in it that gets called that is responsible for validating that the test was successful. So I haven't thought of all the details, but where I'm driving to is I want to restructure this because I want to have a test case essentially for every major language feature. And that's going to give me kind of a gauge on what works, what doesn't. Can I break something, right? Like this, anonymous block thing. we could imagine having a, test case where there's a bunch of this stuff. Are anonymous blocks working correctly in, other non-procedure scopes? Do they work correctly in procedure scopes? Do the initializers, finalizers get created? Right, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And there's a whole bunch of type stuff that we can test and verify it's working, it's not working, all the pieces are there. And then that way, instead of just kind of, we'll have a Fibonacci and we'll have a factorial and whatever else, and presumably as we get more and more of a compiler working, we can layer on more and more complex test cases. But it allows me to break down the testing a bit into smaller chunks, and obviously one of the downsides to, we call this, it is integration testing, because it's going to actually go through the real compiler from the outside, but at the same time, some of these early tests are going to be very unit-like, because I'm going to be testing, okay, do namespaces work? Do foreign function declarations work? Do types work? Do anonymous blocks work? We're going to be testing a lot of individual parts of the whole system, and then we'll get closer and closer to more aggregate, complex tests as we move along. So early on, the individual test files will be very, yes. And you maybe missed the news, Slayer Darth. So starting on Monday, I'm going to be streaming from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. So the stream time is going to be shorter, and it'll be Monday through Friday. And I'm going to update the schedule and all of that. I got to do that still. But yeah, and so right now I'm talking about how I could build a sort of a test suite of Basecode programs, and then we'll have like a special runner that essentially is like a bunch of calls to the compiler sequentially. Well, again, like I don't know. I mean, it's like anything. I've tried things on stream before, and you kind of adjust and learn as you go along. It's very possible that I don't get too much done during a 2-hour stream. I don't know. We'll have to see. I guess that's why I'm kind of trying to, I'm contemplating how I could structure things, perhaps, so that they're in smaller bite-sized chunks. And I'm working on maybe much smaller scoped stuff for the first few hours of my day for the stream. And then after that, I can get into the weeds, I guess, and fall into a recursive rabbit hole as far as code goes. And I guess, if I end up talking a lot, then it'll be a 2-hour stream of me talking. But yeah. So I got to think through how I want to structure that. Is that one of your top benefits for going freelance, being able to set your hours? I guess. It's strange because I've been self-employed for so long, with a couple of exceptions, that I will say this, and I guess I have thought about this. I do think it would be challenging for me. Look, if I had to take a job where I had to be somewhere, at a certain time, especially if that time doesn't really align well with my schedule, I think it would be challenging. Like, as an example, say I got a job at McDonald's, right? And it would be a huge adjustment for me to go to a job where, like, you have to be there plus or minus 5 minutes, right? At whatever. I mean, I am used to having a lot of flexibility there. And I will say that it is a minor irritant for me. Like, in the past, if I've gotten, remote or freelance programming engagements, and they're an agile or worse, a safe, like, structured thing where you have like a scrum and then a scrum of a scrum and a scrum of a scrum of a scrum, and it's this one meeting after another, or worse, one meeting at 3 a.m. because of the offshore teams, one meeting at 9 a.m. for everybody in the US, one meeting at 2 p.m. for the scrum of the scrum of the scrum. That stuff, yeah, I hate that stuff. I think the other benefit of breaking this down into smaller test programs that get run through a aggregate runner is that we can probably get code generation that's runnable earlier in simpler examples, right? Like, this code just on its own is fine. Like, this would actually just run with what we have now. It's not 100% accurate, but it would run. And so I think if by breaking these down into smaller chunks, I'll be able to, it'll be a smaller piece to work on, plus it'll be able to run stuff sooner, and yeah, lots of cool benefits there. So, just so that everybody knows that I actually know how the wind blows, I thought I would load up my Windows virtual machine here and kind of show you where Basecode's at there. And I'm putting all the Windows stuff in a branch right now. It's under features Windows, or feature Windows, I think, up on GitHub. And the reason I'm doing this, because I want to kind of assess the total, once I'm done, right, getting it to run on Windows, I want to assess the total impact to the code base. I mean, so far, it's not, some stuff has to kind of get downshifted a little bit because Visual C++ is shit. But as a compiler, anyway, have no idea what Windows is doing right now. And of course I had to, I usually have a base image that I keep up to date approximately. But even still, like I was behind on updates and it took hours yesterday. Oops. I'm also going to try to, or I will test CLine on Windows as well, but I wanted to do Visual Studio first because I kind of knew that was going to be the most degenerate case on Windows. The heck? Oh, of course. I used the wrong one. Because, you know, why would just picking a folder and them recognizing that there's a CMake list text file there? Like why would that be so difficult? But it is. Anthony Trollope, huh? Yeah, 1,000 words a day. I swear to God. See, this is the kind of shit that Microsoft does that just drives me up the wall. I have clicked never show this again 10 times now. I don't want to see it. I don't give a shit. I know that ReSharper is slow. Okay? Stop fucking telling me that ReSharper is slow. I know. But you watch. It'll pop up again. It'll show up again. Even though I've told him, no, don't tell me. I don't care. So, yeah, basically where this ends up is right now I have to do all these exports. So that the DLL actually has the public symbols that it needs. Boy, the build's not... Oh yeah, no, if you build using MinGW or a different... this is all specifically for Visual C++. This is using the Visual C++ compiler, not something else. So yeah, if you build Basecode with MinGW, or you install Clang or something, and you use CLine or GCC or whatever, you won't have these issues. This is a Microsoft thing. Yeah, see, this is like. So again, when I say Visual Studio, it's gotten better. Maybe that was a little too kind. Like the CMake stuff, is not available right now because they're indexing it. And until they index it, they don't know what to do with it. But it's farking slow as shite to index. Nightbot has left and rejoined before. I don't know why it does that. I don't know if it's Twitch. I don't know if it's Nightbot. It'll come back eventually. I don't worry about it too much. Yep, it's back. I think what happens, either Twitch boots Nightbot, because if you look, Nightbot is always connected to my channel. Like, it's always there. And I'm wondering if, like Twitch occasionally says, hey, you're booted or whatever. And then it has to reconnect. I'm guessing. I have no idea. But it seems like that's what's going on. Some form of timeout for the connection itself. Or Nightbot on their end, like they're doing something, right? And maybe they just ran a software update, or they had something crash. Who knows, right? And yeah, see, it's really bizarre. Like, until they do their indexing thing, okay, so CMake runs, they generate their stuff, pretty standard. So if we look, like, where's a good example? Let's look at hello. Yeah, it's painful. And of course, ReSharper doesn't work until they've finished doing their thing. Yeah, so as a first pass, this machine has 8 cores, this virtual machine. Has 8 cores, 16 gigs of RAM. It's only using 3 gigs if we round up. The disk is not all that busy. CPU, I mean, you can tell it's crunching on something. So, yeah, so like a bunch of these need export. Of course, this is probably gonna mess up the the indexing. Yeah, I mean, in all truthfulness, I would not be using Visual Studio. personally. Like, I'm doing this just really to kind of understand what's necessary to make it work. The one thing that I will say is that ReSharper for C++ is pretty nice. And I have some hope that now that JetBrains has kind of decided to lean on ClangD to do their, parsing and all that and validation, that they'll be able to now kind of put some effort into bringing some of the features that like ReSharper for C++ has to C-Line in general. Because I will say right now, like once it actually gets past the stupid indexing, it's pretty nice. Thank you for the bits. I have a question. Is array redefining on runtime a good practice? Commonly using array literals. So I'm not quite sure what you mean there. Do you mean resizing an array dynamically? Which, again, we'd have to like, what language are we talking about? Because obviously, for C or C++, there is no array. Arrays are just syntactic sugar around pointers. And then at that point, you have your pointer points at some block of memory that was allocated using some allocator. And at that point, you can reallocate that however you need to. Then the question is the efficiency of that algorithm, right? So if it's like if it's like an arena allocator or something, then obviously you're going to probably not have as much overhead. Oh, sorry. Or on C doing something like this. Okay. What's wrong with that? I mean, I wouldn't probably use that exact syntax, but I mean, are you asking, is the initializer a problem? When you have the curly braces and you have the values, right, you're populating the array. Are you asking if that's an issue? Or are you trying to understand what that means, right? Yep, I'm using Visual Subservient Studio. Waiting for it to finish frickin' indexing the code base so I can actually like navigate. Where are we at? 97%. Come on, finish. So, GenOS 3, here's the, again, I'm not 100% clear on what you're asking, but if you're asking, like, is it okay to use Oh, oh. Well, okay, so let me explain what the difference between the two is. And then you can decide which one makes more sense for you, okay? So first, the first one that you showed, that is called an initializer, okay? So you're creating it's weird syntax the way you have it, right? I'm not sure why you're doing a cast, but yeah, I mean, if you had char a, well, and then you could even just do this, right? Because the compiler will figure out that there are 4 of them. But that is an initializer. What does that mean? What that means is the compiler is taking that data that's in the initializer list on the right-hand side, it is embedding it in your executable or library or whatever. And when your program starts up, there's code that when that, again, depending on the scope of what char is, or the A array is, if it's static, if it's global, if it's in a function, it's going to copy or initialize that variable with that list of values. So that list of values gets encoded into your image, and then that variable gets initialized with those values from that image at startup, or whatever the language does around initialization. In the case of C or C++, that would get initialized more or less, if it's static or global, right away. If it's a procedure or like a function, then it has an initializer like that. It'll get initialized when the function scope comes into on the stack. But it's a similar idea, right? There'll be some code emitted that initializes that variable with those values. And typically in this case, it would be like a mem copy or something equivalent to that to initialize that array. So inside of a function, the difference between the initializer list and doing, a sub 0 equal whatever, a sub 1 equal whatever, they're probably fairly equivalent. Now the a sub ... that is going to probably generate more code because the compiler doesn't know, it has no way of knowing, right, that can be rolled up, that in your mind it's the equivalent of that initializer, right? So the initializer is probably more efficient, assuming you have that exact fixed initialization list. But there are a lot of details around that, right? Is the initialization list all static, all constant, right? So your example, you're using constant integer values. That can be heavily optimized by the compiler. If you build that initializer list and it has variables in it, then the compiler is going to generate the equivalent of a sub 0 equal variable, a sub 1 equal variable, a sub 2 equal variable, because at that point it can't be optimized. It's not constant, right? So it just all depends. In terms of style, the initializer lists are a lot nicer. So even if your initializer list is not, it ends up not being a constantly, something that cannot be constantly evaluated, you're still going to end up with something I think that reads nicer than the other syntax. But again, that's a style thing. It's all up to you. Whatever you think reads the best. So, I mean, those are kind of, roughly speaking, the sorts of prices you'd pay, right? Depending on which one you do. But this code looks like Jessica Mack wrote it. Sorry, Jess. Yeah. I mean, so again, are you asking stylistically? Oh, I see what you're doing. I Yeah, that's kind of weird. That syntax is weird. I wouldn't do that. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the compiler will do the right thing, but it reads funny to me. It's not, yeah. What you had before read better. Yeah, sure, yeah. Here's the thing, the way you're doing that in line, I wouldn't do it in line. What I would do is I would define those, since you're probably dealing with like vertice indexes here, right, or something. Your swap, it looks like you're transmuting them or you're transposing them. What I would do is I would just have those patterns. I would just move those as like static predefined things. You can either make them inside the function or outside, doesn't matter, whatever you prefer. And then just assign value to one of them, right? Instead of doing a cast inline, I wouldn't do it that way. Now again, that's a style thing. If you're okay with this, then it doesn't really matter. Because the compiler is going to do the same thing, I think, in either case. These are constants. The compiler, Visual C++ probably will not do the right thing here, but like GCC or Clang will probably ultimately optimize this out into a constant assignment. So yeah, it reads a little funny that way to me, but that's just me. So after like 10 minutes, Visual Studio finished indexing our code. And I think maybe now I can actually build it. It compiles a lot slower. I cannot get over how in 2018 we still fucking have the tilde number short file name crap. Oh, I know C++ compiles slow, and I'm not saying that like Clang or GCC are like super duper fast. But at least my relative impression of performance is that this runs a lot slower. I think you were one of the first folks that showed up today in the chat. I don't know. All right, let's look at our unresolved. Where's my errors? No. So there's only 16 of them, huh? All right, source file, AST builder, element. All right. So Yeah, I don't know. It's like sometimes ReSharper doesn't, I don't know what it's doing. Okay, I'll do it the slow way. Oh, that's the old Microsoft. Oh shit. We have to find a way to make long file names compatible with the old short names for DOS pukes. And the other one was source file, right? I don't understand why ReSharper. I don't know what magic incantation I did yesterday to get ReSharper to enable. Oh, I wonder if Visual Studio ignored me. I said, don't tell me about this error, but I wonder if it disabled it because it thought it was slow. Yeah, you know, 12 bytes back in the day, man. That's oh, AST Builder, that was the other one. No, it's not disabled. Interesting. So the 8.3 thing actually predates MS-DOS. The 8.3 thing came from CPM. So there was some compatibility consideration even all the way back then. And of course, MS-DOS is almost literally a clone of, well, yeah, very much a clone of CPM. Program and map element, or element map, sorry. What's that? Oh, look at that. We got a build. Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Haha. Ooh. Kaboom. So great. So something in the unordered map in Microsoft's version is unhappy. So but where did they put it? Yeah, so one of the things they need is in Visual Studio, you need to be able to hover here or go to properties or something where it will show you what folder, temp folder it created for your output. They do dump it out, like if you redo the, so if we go here, so if we force it to rebuild the CMake stuff, then it shows you where the stuff's at. But otherwise, I never realized how dependent I am on the JetBrains navigation shortcuts. Fortran. That's right. I don't understand though why ReSharper isn't running. Kaboom. It went kaboom. Okay. That didn't go kaboom, but it didn't do anything either. Oh. Yeah, it didn't copy the examples folder in. The post build isn't running from the Visual Studio side. I was working yesterday, unless I did some, I don't know, unless I did something to make it work, but I don't remember explicitly doing anything. I've got it hard-coded. Oops. Yeah, that's not good. What was that? I think it's... Okay, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to close this and... Yep, there we go. It's weird. Like, I wonder, I think that is what I did differently. I opened it from the Team Explorer yesterday, and today I went to open the CMake file, but it works the same. I'm not sure what the difference there is. That's kind of strange. Okay. Anyway, I think it was directive. Yeah. So if so this is just alpha core DLL. And let's double check that's the case. Yep. Alpha dash core DLL. Yeah. I do code and assembly, yeah. I have two series. If you want to go to my YouTube channel, I have one where I do ARM 64, and I have one where I do older x86 in MS-DOS. Yeah, see, now it doesn't see it as a CMake project. That's really weird. Oh. Huh. What is it doing? CMake works fine. I mean, I typically don't have any issues with CMake. Do I like their syntax? No. I don't like their syntax. And I think CMake has, I don't know, it has some bizarre choices in terms of how it works. But it's just one of those things where, like, it's there, everybody's using it. So I use it. Yeah, I used Premake for a while years ago when it first came out, and I thought it was a really cool idea. And I thought it was much nicer than a lot of the other build systems at the time. But yeah, Premake had a lot of holes in it, in my experience, and one of my main rules about using a tool or a library or something has to save me time. If I find a tool or a library and then I become a de facto maintainer of that thing I just tried to adopt, then I'm not interested. You know, it's just, that's too much overhead. It's like this, right? Like this is to me like Microsoft. What the fuck? It's totally unusable until they do this. That's why this is grayed out. I mean, it just, I don't know. It's like, what? I can't build it. I can't. And it's so slow. Ugh. Why? Why? Like, this is one of those things where do it in passes, right? Like, do the absolute minimum indexing you need to do so that you can use it. Then have a more complex, in-depth indexing pass running in the background, filling in details. Oh yeah, exactly. It's like, this is pathetic. I mean, okay, granted, I have a lot of source files here, but I mean, come on, what the hell? Sea Lion loads this, no problem, right? I mean, its startup time here is way, way better. And again, it's okay if you have to like burn CPU. I mean, look how much CPU time they're chugging out. I mean, it's okay if you have to do this in the background. I'm cool with that. Just don't make like everything block on it. Okay, so now they got to some magic point where now it's okay. Okay, so then the question is, okay, so now this time when I loaded it, yeah, so here's what I think happened. The first time, if you'll remember, I got that warning up at the top where Visual Studio is like, oh, ReSharper was eating a lot of time, and do you want to disable it? I said, never show this again, but I think what that meant was turn it off. And so the first time through, that's why ReSharper wasn't working, because they turned it off, even though I told them not to. But like, don't they cache this somewhere? Anyway. I'm gonna stop bitching now. Oh, but I can't build anything yet. Yeah, I mean, I don't typically use Visual Studio. I'm doing this because I'm doing this to make it compatible, potentially. We'll see. Okay, so I changed the path on the DLL. Unable to, what? How did I fix that? bet I know what I did. Yeah. Visual Studio was great, like in the Visual Studio 2010, 2012 timeframe. 2015, things started to get real hanky. Hattie ho! Okay, so we recompiled the file I changed. But it's not. Oh, I'm so stupid. I fixed the code, but I didn't fix the code. I fixed the code, but I didn't fix the code. Yeah. Oops. Which means oh no. Excuse me. Yeah, that's not good. Well, it did make the AST model, so part of it's working. Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out why it's not loading that. I use the forward slashes because the boost path stuff will change it. Will Basecode support exporting? What do you mean by exporting? Yeah. Yeah, you'll be able to do that. There will be no external build tools. Everything will be done with Basecode. Now there's an invalid token in there somewhere. Line 107, column 4. And I noticed that my Unicode micro thing there, my mu, is not, Windows is not liking that. I don't know. I don't see it in there. What you bitching about? Oh, I bet I know. I bet I'm not handling Windows new lines properly. Oh, I love Windows. Fuck. Such a piece of shit. Yeah, I bet there's a character in there the parser's not willing to accept. Yeah. Yeah. All right, real quick, I'm going to see if I can run through the debugger. This is what I think it's using, Ninja. Yeah. Excuse me. Here we go. Maybe. That sucks. Bug and launch settings, the executable. Okay. Oh my God. Oh, no. Go away. Evil. Turn all your shit off. Oh my God. Passing arguments to customizing your environment. What about launch vs JSON? In case you're wondering, yeah, of course, it's kind of painful. All right, well, I'm gonna have to read up. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the file. It's just like, I guess, as usual though, the problem with the file is it's opaque. So I have to consume this to really understand like what's going on. And then it turns out that the file that it lets you edit, yes, that's one of them, but then there's this CPP properties.json. So I'm assuming I probably, okay, maybe this. Debugging C++ binaries. To get started, you want to navigate in Solution Exploder to your executable, then right-click and select Debug. Okay. I do not debug. Select a debugger. Native. Select. Okay. So we have this, but okay. Project. Alternatively, and see what's weird is it says it will immediately start a debugging session, but it doesn't. It opens, it opens this, which I get it. Okay, this is going to configure that. And see, they show choosing the make file and going to debug. If you want to customize your program's arguments, select debug and launch settings instead. This will create a launch vs.json file pre-populated with information about the program. To specify additional arguments, just add them in the args JSON array under, so it's got one configuration entry. This is type, project name. But this is actually a binary. Okay. So it's got a schema, so args. And are there are args here too? I don't know to which one I should be arguing. Well, let's do it. Let's try this. I guess there's only two, right? So I flip the coin, and if I get it wrong. So, all right. There's our args. And if they're telling the truth, yeah, here's, all right. But where's the launch file? Like, where did it go? Bootstrap, oh, it's hidden. It's in a magic folder. Right, so, and I gotta turn on things that are hidden so I can see it. Yeah. All right, there it is. And go. Oh. Yeah. Okay, well, that's going to be a fight for later today. All right, well, so I went over 21 minutes. Yeah, so just a reminder, I'm going to update the schedule and on the Twitch channel page. I'll put a link to it also on the Discord server. And so I'll be streaming from 5 a.m. to 7:30 Monday through Friday, starting on Monday. And yeah, I will continue fighting with this, figure out how to get it to work so I can debug it. And yeah, so, and I'll think about how I'm going to restructure or set up a testing suite for the Basecode language so we can start creating individual test cases. Yeah, we'll see how I can put that together. So, let's see if I can find somebody to raid. Probably not. Let's see. CMG Riffing is building a web app for song things. Making an open source JavaScript OS. Yeah, let's do the open source. Or, I don't know. Which one do you guys want? You want to watch the Tunes web app for song structuring, building the front end now, or making an open source JavaScript OS? Let's do the JavaScript OS guy. That's not what I wanted. Of course, he has a really weird 505. 505E06B2. All right, we're going to raid this guy. 505E06B2. Here we go. Say hi, be nice. I will be back online Monday morning, 5 a.m. And just a reminder one more time, I'll be streaming from 5 till 7 a.m. And that'll be the new schedule, at least for the next probably 9 months or so. And yeah, Monday through Friday. I'll update all the schedule and other info and stuff. See you guys Monday. Have a good one. Here we go. Bye.